You heard the Prime Minister this morning talking about the focus and success that we've had around positioning New Zealand from a marketing perspective, and now the need to really focus on sales and bringing that value back to NZ. I suspect we're going to hear that partnerships and a deep knowledge of US customers and consumers is critical to success. Of course, this is all underpinned by best-in-class technology investment and adoption on farm here in New Zealand to support the delivery of our authentic, sustainable and good for the world position. We have an exceptional panel with us today who I'd like to introduce. Each of the panel members are going to spend 5 minutes providing you an overview of their approach and strategy in the United States, followed by Q&A. So please send those questions through to Slido as we go. Charlotte Rutherford is the Director of Sustainability at Fonterra. She's spent 20 years supporting and driving how the cooperative tackles sustainability opportunities and challenges. Charlotte has led teams responsible for water, climate, research and development, animal welfare and food safety for New Zealand's largest dairy processor. Charlotte is currently working closely with Fonterra's customers to ensure the cooperative's strategic ambition to lead in sustainability is realised on the global stage. Welcome, Charlotte. Kate Beddoe joined Silver Fern Farms in October 2020 as Chief Sustainability and Risk Officer to bring a strategic approach to sustainability and risk. Prior to joining Silver Fern, Kate held a number of executive and senior leadership roles and practiced commercial law for some years before moving into the corporate, and brings a unique perspective from working in a range of industries, including professional services, agriculture, manufacturing and utilities, both here in New Zealand and internationally. And finally, Ruth Leary is the Head of Strategy and Engagement at AgriZeroNZ. Ruth has a diverse background spanning senior commercial roles in prominent agribusinesses, specialty ingredients and export firms. AgriZero is a public-private partnership between the New Zealand government and major agribusinesses investing in to accelerate tools for tech and farmers to help reduce emissions. Welcome to the three of you. Charlotte, I'd like to start with you and hear a little more around Fonterra's strategy and approach to the US.
Thank you. And first of all, a huge thank you to Simon and Fran for this day today and this morning. This morning was brilliant. You know, when you're sitting there kind of juggling your diary and thinking how you're going to take a day out to do something, you question it, but I was just blown away. And also sitting there in a blind state of panic, knowing that I had to get up on stage after the speakers this morning and that real high-level strategic view, and then talk about something that maybe seem a little more specific. I did as I'm sure many of you did, I did a wee check of my emails before I came up on stage, and if you could have chucked my inbox up on a screen, first of all, I'm glad we're not. I couldn't get over how many of my emails this morning that had come through related directly to sustainability in the US. And not just customers, but even wider and broader than that. So our head of engineering and technical in terms of our manufacturing sites is in the US at the moment, looking for new technology about how we're going to save water and decarb in our sites. Very exciting email from our sales team about a new customer looking about procuring some low carbon milk from us, which was brought a very big smile to my face. And then additionally, our marketing team over there, we have another customer coming over in February that is really looking forward to launching a new initiative directly aimed at our farmers about helping them with, giving them some extra value in terms of how they perform. And I had two reflections on that. The first of all is sustainability at Fonterra, and embedding sustainability in your strategy has been quite a journey for us. And I think sustainability for many organisations is it's a solid tack on the side of a business that pops in now and then to a board meeting or to a C-suite meeting now and then. But Fonterra has worked hard, and it is embedded throughout how we do business and our culture of how we think about doing business, making money and working through sustainability. There's still more to do, but the breadth of people that popped up on my inbox in that break and the different areas of the business that they sit, I think kind of shows that. And then it really was the reflection on how much of that and the work that the business does links back to sustainability and the signals we get out of the US. These are very customer based, so that business to business push is by far the strongest driver that we have. Now, you can't be binary about these things because the US is a massive country, and of course there are many other aspects that they are looking at too, and we have, federal law relating to climate disclosure. Many of us here are well familiar, Kate and I, in terms of climate disclosure and what that means for a business. The climate smart agriculture investments that are over $3 billion. Now, whether they remain, who knows, but I'm sure there will be some degree of support for farmers that will continue to morph from that. And then individual state regulation that can relate to climate as well. And I think of California and where they have taken that. You become hyper aware to what's happening in the States and what that means and what that will impact on for us. For Fonterra, it's about our competitive advantage and it's about our most material issues and how they play out in that space. So for us, our most material sustainability issues are climate, nature, animal well-being and sustainable value. And in terms of the US market, there's both challenge and opportunity that sits there. So it's a value-add strategic market for us, and we have some very large, important customers in there that also have very ambitious sustainability goals. And when I say very ambitious, eye-wateringly ambitious when you're having to have a conversation with them over a procurement discussion. And more ambitious than what we're probably discussing on the domestic stage here in New Zealand. So for Fonterra, we have to bridge that gap between what our farmer owners are hearing and looking at on their farms and what their customers may be asking for. And we have to bridge that through value and the extra value that we can create from the position that we have there. So that's a challenge that can become an opportunity, and there's another big opportunity that sits there for us, and that's in the space of how we farm. So pretty uniquely, maybe Ireland is the other one in the world, pastoral dairy farming has a really, really good story to tell. And when you look over into the States and some of the language that's being used that relates to nature and the use of regenerative agriculture, we have a lot to offer in being able to speak the language that some of our customers are asking for. We have to be careful. We have to be careful about how we say that and the words that we use. But it's something that we must grab that opportunity to create more value for New Zealand farmers and in my case, Fonterra shareholders. We can't cut our nose off to spite our face about what might be asked from us in New Zealand and what we could gain on the global stage. So that becomes really important to creation of value for Fonterra in terms of our sustainability message into the US.
Excellent, thank you, Charlotte. Kate, I suspect there are a few familiar sentiments in what was just said. Be interested to hear Silver Fern Farm's approach.
Yeah, kia ora koutou katoa, ko Kate Beddoe taku ingoa. I almost just want to say ditto to what you've just said. I want to give you a bit of an overview this morning about how Silver Fern Farm sees sustainability as pretty much a core offensive and defensive play that underpins our strategy. It really is a strategic lever for us as we seek to create value and new opportunities in our markets, and particularly in the US. I think, I would just like to reassure the Prime Minister actually that Silver Fern Farms is on the sales hustle, and we are converting those opportunities into real value and real dollars from the market opportunities that we're seeing, and that particularly holds for the US market. And I think the directions from our markets are pretty clear and becoming stronger every day, and I would say accelerating at pace. As Charlotte just pointed out, demonstrating continual progress towards a range of sustainability initiatives is really just becoming the reality of doing business now. And similar to Charlotte's experience, whilst we always thought that emissions reductions and climate was the number one issue, and we would say, climate and emissions today, perhaps biodiversity and nature tomorrow, let me tell you, tomorrow is here today. And more of our customers are not just talking to us about Scope 3 emissions and emissions reductions, but also about biodiversity and nature as well. So for us, it's really about staying relevant to those high-end premium customers, being able to access the good premiums in those markets that are on offer. But then ultimately, as sustainability becomes more and more of a table stakes in conversations, it's going to be a question of market access into the future. And that's why we've really worked hard to put becoming a trusted nature-positive producer right at the heart of our business model. I think the other thing that's becoming really clear excuse me, and linked to that notion of trust is the need to provide what we call proof over promise. So a really important part of our sustainability strategy and our programs that we've always sought to approach these with the highest level of integrity, authenticity, transparency and trust as much as possible, making sure everything's science-based, evidence-based, robust and third-party assured. And I often talk to my business, and they probably say I bang on about it way too much, but I talk to them about this notion is that we don't just sell red meat, we actually sell trust. And it's trust that's really grounded in the science and stewardship of our farmers. It's trust that can only be delivered and assured through data and technology, and trust that has to meet our current and future customers' expectations around social licence to operate. And trust that you can trace back to New Zealand is actually highly valuable and highly monetisable. And we've begun to extend that thinking now, not just to red meat and trust, but also into our farming systems. You know, our farmers are investing a lot of money in developing the natural capital assets that they have on those farms, and we have to make sure we get the right return on investment on those assets. So as a business, we really believe that we have the farms that the world needs, but it's the proof of this, that proof over promise, that's differentiating us in our markets. And we're seeing that through the data and the reporting and the IP that we're building. And that's creating a super competitive advantage for us in our market. I often get feedback from our customers with a bit of a wow effect in terms of the amount of data that we can deliver. I know Fonterra is really strong on their approach to data as well. And while we're seeing interest from key global markets, it's the US markets is the one where we're seeing heightened interest. So similar to Fonterra, it's moving with pace and coming towards us at a really rapid rate. And it's actually transforming the interactions that we're having in our markets. So historically, we would have talked about having a very transactional relationship or a trade with our customers. It was a red meat procurement based on price and volume. And with New Zealand red meat production being less than 2% of global supply, it's really hard to compete on price and volume alone, and nor should we if you think about the points I just made about that we're selling trust and our whole farming system. But now we're seeing this total shift, and no longer are we just dealing with a red meat category buyer in a procurement relationship with our sales team. With our big key customers, particularly in the US, I'm also in the room, their sustainability team's in the room. And, you know, we might come with one person, they come with climate specialists, carbon analysts, nature analysts, and sometimes water and soil analysts I've seen in the room. And they're really looking to structure something different. It's a strategic sustainability sourcing play, and it's all about long-term partnerships. And the US is where our big customers, so our customers like McDonald's and Costco, have got very serious about this, particularly at the moment about their Scope 3 emissions profiles and their programs for reducing and their targets, but also more and more about the double dividend they can see around good biodiversity and nature benefits. And of course, our Scope 3 emissions and our emissions profile and our farmers' emissions profile are part of their Scope 3 emissions profile. So whatever we do and how we produce our food in this country actually really matters. But that brings big opportunities, and we are seeing significant dollars being invested by customers either through premiums for these products or back onto farm directly with investing in the farms that our farmers hold. But to enable this, of course, and to enable this opportunity to be realised, we have to adhere to international best practice and provide that data and that proof over promise so that we have credibility in the markets. And maybe just to give you a couple of quick examples to bring this to life. At the moment, we're working really hard to finalise a very significant new program with a key customer in North America who'll be purchasing our Net Carbon Zero by Nature product and co-branding it in store. It's a real game changer for us and a super exciting opportunity. And if you're not familiar with our Net Carbon Zero by Nature product, it's a carbon inset product where we buy sequestration that occurs from the vegetation on our farmers' lands and use that to balance out the carbon that relates to the product. And it's super cool and exciting because not only do we pay our farmers for the red meat that they provide, but we also pay them for the sequestration services. So we've created a new diversified value stream for our farmers on their lands. And also the money that they get paid for that sequestration services, they have to reinvest it back into nature positive activity on their farm. So we've created this positive flywheel in related to our nature positive program of work. On top of this, we're also seeing a number of other similar supply programs into premium, both North American retailers and food service channels, that have been won solely on the back of our sustainability and nature positive programs of work. And of course, that hasn't happened overnight. It's taken years to put together the foundational work in place to develop that credibility, that robustness, that transparency and authenticity that make our sustainability programs winners in the eyes of our North American customers. But now we're really starting to see that value pay off. And this work all stems from our Sustainability Action Plan, our strategic foresight work, and our systems thinking approach to sustainability. And a key part of that is also incentivising our farmers to take up new standards and new ways of recording the good work they've already done through our New Zealand Farm Assurance Plus program. So that's a higher standard of farming where it picks up elements and reporting and metrics around climate, but also biodiversity, water health and soil health. And that's a key part of our net carbon zero by nature approach. And lastly, of course, alongside Fonterra, we're very excited about our investment in the AgriZero partnership, which we see as pretty critical in cracking the methane issue and getting real tools into the hands of our farmers to help them make emissions reductions in their production systems. We see this as critical for opening up new opportunities in our markets, and we're really excited to see where that goes.
Nice, thank you, Kate. That's a great segue through to Ruth. Ruth, really keen to hear more about AgriZero and not just as a business, but also the work you're doing in the US at the moment.
Thank you, and yes, what a lovely segue. Thank you very much, Kate. Yes, so AgriZero, we are about a year and a half old now, and actually a unique model globally. We're a world first public-private partnership in the space of being an investment fund. In fact, we're investing venture capital into solutions and tools for farmers to use to reduce their agricultural emissions, and specifically it's livestock emissions. So we're focused on methane and nitrous oxide, and I think Minister McLeod would be pleased that we have an ambitious ambition of a 30% reduction by 2030. So we're trying to support the likes of Fonterra and Fern farms with their targets and maintain that global competitiveness for the exports that we're sending over to the US. So we have 11 investors or shareholders, you could say. So that includes the government who have dollar for dollar matched the funding from the private sector. So we've got, I'm going to try and remember them now, it's A2 Milk, ASB, ANZ, ANZCO, a meat company as well, Fonterra, BNZ, Rabobank, Ravensdown, Fern Farms, of course, and Synlait. So really representing a good group, a very collaborative group who have agreed to come together in a sort of pre-competitive way to invest in our fund. We've got 191 million so far. That fund can grow. We've recently become a limited partnership, which does enable potential additional investment, including potentially from overseas, for us to try and scale and find these solutions for our pasture-based farmers here in New Zealand. So we have a really interesting footprint here in New Zealand, 53%, or a bit over that, of our total emissions profile in the country comes from the agriculture sector. But in saying that, our farmers are already pretty sustainable. Like, they're doing a good job on a global stage already when you look at the efficiency of what we're producing. We're trying to help them go further and do more and continue to adopt innovation to farm more sustainably into the future and help our investors be able to provide the customers with the products they're asking for, which increasingly is about the footprint of the product that they are buying. What's the greenhouse gas footprint? So for the US, it's actually, we have, since we've been set up a year and a half ago, we've made 7 venture investments. We've scanned over 190 things now, potential solutions for reducing methane and nitrous oxide. Many of them don't suit the pasture-based farming system in New Zealand. Some of them didn't have the science to support what they were saying they could achieve. So some have been parked, some have been taken off the list. So we've made 7 investments. That might make us sound quite picky, but these are still, in some cases, quite early stage investments that we're really focused on injecting the capital to accelerate. 3 of those 7 are in the US, and we see the US as an absolute hub, and I think we heard Prime Minister Luxon say this morning, the US is an exceptional source of ideas, innovation and investment, and we completely agree with that. There's a leading vaccine program in the US where organisation actually led by a Kiwi guy, Colin, set up specifically by Bill Gates's Breakthrough Ventures to find a methane vaccine. Because if you think globally and you think about methane, actually most of it is burped out, so that's where the methane comes from, by the way, it's usually this end. Most of it's through burps. Most of that burping happens in grazing, extensive farming systems, not in a feedlot or a barn or a housed system. So there's a real opportunity here if we find these practical solutions for a grazing context that actually they can be, you know, taken and translated and amplified overseas as well. So maximum benefit for the, you know, the successful ventures, but particularly for the climate as well.
Awesome, thank you so much. That was a kind of great lay of the land, an idea of where all three businesses are playing at the moment. Let's get into some of the detail. Charlotte, we heard customers talked about a lot, particularly between yourself and Kate. Can you just explain in a little bit more detail the importance of partnership in the United States and really what that means for driving change and particularly for us driving a premium back to New Zealand?
Yeah, probably first of all thinking about change and value, it's a real chicken and egg exercise when you're trying to engage farmers, is that show me the value to make the change, and I'm saying do the change so I can bring you the value. So you sometimes can get in a circular argument, or have done for a wee while. The good news is we have moved on and are beginning to be in a much better space with the customer premiums that we are seeing invested back into our farmers from the likes of Mars and Nestle. That is real money coming back to reward Fonterra farmer owners for the work that they've done in creating, being amongst the lowest carbon producers of milk, but also their nature credentials that sit there. But it's not just about the creation of the premium, that's very important, and I will be chasing those in my job constantly. It's protection of the value too, because these customers have really ambitious targets they need to achieve, and if they can't find the ingredients that help them achieve that from New Zealand, they will find them elsewhere. So we also need to be able to value the protection of those existing high value customers that we have, and many of those are out of the US. One of the ways to do that, and one of the very successful ways to do that, is getting our farmers closer to the customers. So the nature of a cooperative is that farmers invest their capital so that they can have a management team that's worrying about processing, manufacturing and selling product for them, and they can get on with the job of farming and producing that. And we did that really successfully for a very long time. All of a sudden, in a very huge correction now, farmers need to be acutely aware of who their customers are, what their customers want, and what they're asking for, because it's behind the farm gate now in terms of those outcomes. And it's our job to connect customers to farmers. The good news is customers are really keen to do that, particularly some of the US-based ones, and they come down most years, sometimes several times in a year, and all they want to do is be on farm. We had a meeting probably about a year ago now between very senior people at Mars and a group of farmers in the Cambridge Farm Source store, which is our retail store. First of all, Fonterra staff were banned from speaking, which is a very challenging thing for me at the best of times. And it was a conversation between farmers and customers, and I was so nervous about what either side of the spectrum was going to say in this, but it went brilliantly. It was fabulous, and farmers are still talking about it around the area, around the district. And one of them at the end said, piped up and said, "This has been amazing, and I just want to say, Charlotte, you can say this to us 400 times, and it doesn't mean as much as hearing it today from Mars." Now, that might be a reflection of my communication style, I don't know, but rather that it's about farmers realising that these are their customers, that Fonterra is their cooperative, and that link in terms of what customer wants is what is happening on their farm. Just yesterday, I was with farmers in Te Amutu, and we were talking about premium that is coming back to them from the likes of Mars, and they said that's fine, that's really good as long as we control the narrative. And I found that, I did address that because I thought that was just a little bit dangerous, because I said you can't think of the customers as controlling the narrative either. The narrative is around us all, and we're all responding to it. And we can either sit there and think that these things are being pushed on us, even with that extra value, or you can think about it in a partnership, in a really deep strategic partnership with these high value customers that not only returns that extra value, but more importantly protects that existing value and grows it in terms of volume with those customers.
And Kate, similarly, you mentioned the need for this proof beyond promise, and I think that's really interesting in the US context, where obviously consumers are increasingly sceptical about claims that are on packet. And you also talked about this significant program with a co-branded approach with a US retailer. I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that and give us some insights into how that's working for you.
The co-brand opportunity is a little bit one I can't talk about, but there's another one that I can talk about. So this week actually is super exciting for us because it marks the first week in New Zealand of processing for a new supply arrangement that we have with Whole Foods. And Whole Foods is a high-end retailer, clearly North America. Most of you probably know who they are. I've been with the business 4 years. Those in the business longer than me tell me that they've been trying to get into Whole Foods for over 10 years. It's been kind of the nirvana of value in the market in the US for us. And the only reason that we've got there and we've got our foot in the door is because of our sustainability and nature positive leadership and credentials that we've been working on developing over the last 4 years. And it's, again, all about putting that proof behind the promise. And I should say, I'm not saying that we're perfect on that, by the way. It's really hard to do, and we've come a long way, and we still have a long way to go, but it's a significant part of the journey and the competitive advantage. But obviously there's a lot of groundwork across all of our business to realise that opportunity, so we can get our foot in the door and we can get the kind of deal over the line, but then you have to back it up, right? So, and it's only because of our investment in New Zealand Farm Assurance Plus, the investment in our on-farm sustainability team, the way we work with our farmers, and start recording all those good things that they've actually been doing for quite a while, but kept them in their chest pocket on a bit of paper and haven't put it into a computer so we can collate the data and show the good work that they're doing that's enabled all of this to happen. So, that's just one example, but a really amazing one for us that's going to stand us in good stead as we continue to roll out. We're at a very exciting tipping point in our business. We have a number of big deals just about to tip over the line. I wish we were having this conference like 2 months later, but all of this has been driven from our sustainability leadership and our nature positive program of work and the ability to provide that proof over promise.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on Whole Foods. It's a significant milestone. Ruth, when it comes to partnerships and identification of opportunities, how have you worked to find like-minded co-investors and stakeholders in the US?
Yeah, great question. And I guess a privilege of being an investment fund with quite a focused remit for investment means that you're quite quickly into the landscape and getting introductions to promising technology and people in the space. And as you do your own research, you find that too. We did have a leg up. If you think about the 11 shareholders we have, including the private sector companies to my right, we did have some introductions off the bat to, as we took on their work that they'd been doing already on trying to mitigate methane and nitrous oxide. So there were some introductions there. But what we had to do really was hop on a plane, which don't talk about those emissions. We're trying to have a really big impact here, everybody. So we went over and found what were the most appropriate forums and summits we could attend to actually meet these startups, meet these ventures, meet the collaborators and co-investors as well, because it's going to take quite a bit of capital to pull some of these things through to the market and through to the farmer. We have already invested alongside or co-invested with the likes of, some philanthropic organisations and some impact funds and VCs, the likes of Bezos Earth, Breakthrough Ventures, Regen VC, Good Growth Capital. These are all out of the US. As far as the partnerships, we spend a lot of time engaging with the universities in the US, which are really at the forefront of the R&D in the space of methane mitigation, and often collaborating with the New Zealand research agencies, actually. So either engaged in trials or in our due diligence advice that we get on, does the science stack up for this thing that we're looking at? Penn State, UC Davis, MIT, Cornell, North Carolina State, all of those universities have had a lot of engagement and input for us as well. So, yeah, it's completely invaluable. And if you think about the global hub of biotech and innovation being Boston and North Carolina, we've got to get ourselves up there and learn what they're doing.
Can I just maybe add how important AgriZero is for us in our conversations with our customers in the US? So, biogenic methane emissions are really hard to abate, and, we're doing some good work around using removals or the sequestration that occurs on our farmers' lands to, have an interim measure around insetting, but really we want emissions reductions, our customers want emissions reductions. When we talk about AgriZero in our meetings with our customers, they're super excited, getting super invested and prepared to actually put their own money in to support the adoption of those solutions on farms. So now I have, customers in the US who are very keen to help fund and co-invest the scale up and adoption of those solutions back at the farm level. So that's really reinvestment back into farmers' hands to help our customers meet their Scope 3 emissions. So it's just such a critical piece of our discussion and our puzzle as we look to solve climate.
Just taking that further, as I see questions come through on Slido around, I guess, the drivers from your customers, and the question there around whether or not the pull on sustainability is coming from their consumer or their shareholder. Have you got any insights? Anyone like to comment on that?
I would say it's probably a combination of both for sure. McDonald's, for example, in meeting, telling us about their science-based targets, which is a 16% absolute emissions reduction, 7% of which they're going to get from agriculture. Kind of ironically, we supply about 7% of product to McDonald's. They're doing it because they think it's the right thing to do as a corporate citizen, and so that's coming from their consumers' perspectives about what being a good corporate citizen means and how they need to stand up and take a position on issues that are important globally to their consumer base. I don't think you'll ever see a low-carbon Big Mac in a store, but you'll see a whole lot of strategic sustainability sourcing that enables them to have a different story about who they are and what they stand for. I'm not sure about their shareholder pressure, but certainly banking and financial institutions are starting to ask questions around decarbonisation and climate and moving more and more towards nature as well.
I would agree with that, Kate. Another tale from customers talking directly to farmers was one farmer looking the head of procurement from Mars dead in the eye and saying, "Why are you doing this to us?" And she turned around and replied, "Because it's being done to us as well." So again, being part of that broader ecosystem. So pressure from shareholders. In Mars' example, that's the family in terms of what they want to see. But you're right. McDonald's, the right thing to do. They certainly communicate that to us as well. In terms of consumer, they're probably a little less. Our customers tell us that consumers probably aren't there at the moment in terms of the value angle. They're certainly asking questions and wanting to see decarbonisation in terms of the food that they see, but whether they can extract value is a different thing, and that's why it's important when they have their conversations with us that they say, we acknowledge your low carbon position in terms of New Zealand dairy, but we're more interested in the fact you've got a roadmap to keep producing, because we see this becoming more and more important in the future. So we have, like many organisations, net zero by 2050. That is an ambition. Anyone that says otherwise and tries to say that they've got a plan or a target, it's a target, then I would love to have a conversation. But we also have 2030 targets, which we know we can get to and we know that we can reduce, including a 30% reduction in Scope 3. So for our customers, they start the conversation because of where we're at now, but they continue the conversation and they start talking about value and protection because of the commitments we've made to moving forward. And that's because they anticipate in the future where their consumers are going to go with this.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's becoming table stakes. And there's another question coming on Slido there, which is around how do we energise and enthuse others around the strategic importance of sustainability. And essentially, if I can paraphrase what you're saying, is we need to do it to still be at the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. There's some specific and great value today, but ultimately, like all attributes and all products, it will become a requirement for trading into the future, which is why I said earlier, you know, there's a opportunity now for high premium value in our markets, but ultimately it'll be a question potentially of market access and consumer support. I mean, if I look forward, you know, maybe 5 or 10 years, there will be solves for things like methane for our industries. You know, the North American industrial-led farming systems might get there a little bit before us with, you know, feed additives, because that's easier to apply than an application of pastoral farming system where we need vaccines or boluses and genetics and probiotics and all the things that Ruth and AgriZero are looking at. At the end of the day, it'll be a zero-sum game. There will be a methane solution and low carbon meat and dairy available. And then what's New Zealand's competitive advantage? For me, it's solely and squarely in our nature. We have such an amazing pastoral farming system with huge amount of biodiversity and nature, which is going to be super valuable to the consumers of the future. You know, New Zealand sheep and beef farmers hold 25% of New Zealand's remaining biodiversity on their farmlands. That's an incredible stat and something that we're really passionate about, you know, restoring and enhancing and protecting, but as a means of creating value. And so we need to start thinking, you know, climate's a very important sustainability issue, but so is biodiversity and so is nature. And if you think about nature as a natural capital asset, and we're used to thinking about assets and return on investments of assets, we have to think about how do we account for that value in nature and how do we start pricing that into our pricing structures in markets and also getting that value to our farmers. Because the thing that motivates farmers most is value and being able to stay in farming and doing an amazing job with that natural capital assets that they have.
And just, I guess, drilling into that a little more and going back to something that Ruth said earlier, just around the technology that you're seeing in the United States and how some of it's not necessarily applicable to our pastoral system. From a competitive advantage perspective, we've obviously pushed pastoral farming for some time. Do you see potentially that competitive advantage shrinking or narrowing as new technology adoption comes on farm for those what's been consistently confinement systems in the US?
Well, I guess at AgriZero we're trying to make sure that doesn't shrink. And certainly if you think about how do we enthuse people, your question just earlier, how do we keep people enthused? There is a huge opportunity. New Zealand is world famous for pioneering, you know, really innovative pasture-based farming methods. We are seen in such high regard on the global stage, and we cannot lose that, and that's why we're focused on finding those solutions for a pasture-based system. But the market opportunity, if we get it right, is huge, because for the actual solutions themselves and the valuation of those solutions, there is, like I was saying before, most of the world is farming in an extensive system. Even in animals that do get finished on a feedlot, they'll start life often in a grazing system. So those lower input solutions, like a methane vaccine, there's been a lot of interest in that from global philanthropic funders as well, because they can see it's such a powerful tool, a once-a-year vaccine, you know, no risks there with residues and things. It's a very practical tool, can be incorporated with another vaccine a farmer's already using. So, yeah, a real drive to try and get those things right. I think, yeah, we're looking for the slower release type in a portfolio approach to making sure our farmers in New Zealand have a selection of tools to choose from that will fit into their farming system and not change the way we're farming and having to get all the animals into a confined system.
Helen, I was just keen to build on some of the things that have been said, but particularly what Kate talked about in nature and our story that we've got to tell, particularly through the US market, is I do become concerned that, you know, pastoral farming has an impact on the environment. That's, you know, we've been dealing with that in New Zealand for decades, and lots of change has been in place. But we also have an amazing story to tell compared to other ways that protein is produced in and around the world. And a combination of, I think it was discussed this morning, our humility and also the rising pressure of greenwashing, forcing people back into green hushing of where this sits, means that we probably aren't telling our story as well as we, when I say we, I mean the collective we of New Zealand to that question as well, or supporting the people that are trying to tell the story as well as we could be. And I think that's something collectively New Zealand could kind of step up and acknowledge that while farming must continue to minimise its impact on the environment, and we're all committed to that. absolutely. All farmers are committed to that as well. At the same time, we have to exploit the comparison to other farming systems in and around the world about the things that we do, particularly, as Kate said, in the nature space. And I think that's really important for our success and in the US market.
And that notion of, again, proof over promise and trust and transparency supports all of that. I mean, we've adopted a philosophy of radical transparency in relation to our sustainability program of work. You'll see in supermarket, if you buy our products, our beef and our lamb, the higher cuts of our produce are all net carbon zero by nature. You can have a look at that pack. It'll tell you how many grams of carbon are in that pack for that packet of meat, up and then down, because we've inset it with the native vegetation on farm. We tell the story of the beautiful native vegetation on our farmers' lands that helps provide that inset product. And we show a full breakdown across the whole value chain of the carbon and where it is. And we count that from the birth of the animal all the way through to the disposal of product in your own homes after you've cooked it. So, the biggest antidote to greenwashing is trust and transparency. And so that's a big reason why we've gone down that path.
And I guess on the same vein, credentials, certifications, and the importance of those in the US. I saw a question come up on Slido earlier. Storytelling's all well and good, but how do you verify that? What does the US consumer see as important on label, and what's been your approach to aligning those things?
Do you want me to go?
Well, I would just probably reiterate first what Kate said about the proof. Data, over and over again. So we have something with our farmers that we have a suite of measurements across every farm that supplies milk to Fonterra, individual footprints, whether it be for nitrogen loss, whether it be for climate, what they're doing on nature, where the trees are. So that's every single farm. It's not a select group, it is every farm. And we use that in order to create these premiums and to create the trust with our customers. And they have told us over and over again, particularly the US-based ones, you are second to none on the level of data on farm that you have. And you need to be using that over and over again. We have an insights report that goes to farmers that tracks them every year and compares them to their peers. And one of our customers takes it to US dairy companies and shows it to them and says, when are you going to do this? I'm sure that goes down like a cup of cold sick with those dairy companies that are competitors to that, but we're pretty proud of that, and it reflects exactly what you say about you have to prove where you're sitting. You can't just be making marketing promises, and that's incredibly important to us.
I just want to give you guys big props for that, because you're way ahead of us. We don't have data from every farm yet. That's something we're working towards. We've got a good range of data, but you guys are doing a fantastic job. For us, with our net carbon zero by nature product, for example, we made sure we had the best science that we could on the life cycle assessment, so using AgriResearch, a preeminent science organisation in New Zealand. We have third-party certification from Toitu. We certify to ISO standards, so recognised internationally. It's third-party independent assurance, so it's not just us saying, but we go through all of a very rigorous process to get that product certified. And then, we have to get through the USDA labelling process. But all of those proof points and all of that data and all of that information and third-party verification stands us in extremely good stead. I was in a meeting with the USDA labelling team earlier in the year, and when I showed them our kind of new label, which we haven't launched in the US yet, which is this radical transparent label, they were just so excited about it and saw that it set the standard and what they wanted more for consumers in the US to have that level of transparency.
There's a question through Slido on asking for a comment on the potential GMO trials in New Zealand and what risk this might be to sustainability for our agri-exports. Would anyone care to comment on that one?
I could kick us off. So GMO trials, we have in our scan for technology that may help us reduce emissions and reduce methane or nitrous oxide. We have come across a number of GE, so genetic edited, or GM technology that could be potential tools depending on what happens with our the overview of our regulation and legislation at the moment. And we can see there's probably a high likelihood that GE in particular may be a way we can move to, and much of the world already has. GE is not something that you can even sort of test for when you're talking about within within species or within product genes. So yeah, the potential, I think there's a balance there, but of risk with the sustainability credentials that these things could offer. And so I think the conversation has certainly changed from where it's been in the past. A lot of the world has started to move forward with use of genetic technology, maybe not always the full way to GMO, but maybe they have done that too. And I think we need to keep our eyes open as to the capability of GM and GE, because it can certainly enable some efficiencies, some reduced waste, and again, help some of the sustainability credentials. There is one investment we've made into the GE space. This company has sort of two tracks. One is not using any genetic techniques, and one is. But using the GE, they can get a sort of 8-fold amplification of the natural enzyme that can help reduce methanogens in the rumen. So, and they've got the founder of CRISPR on their mentor board. And they've found something incredible that's actually naturally occurring, but managed to find a way to express and increase that. So it just shows you there is some interesting opportunities if we can use these technologies carefully in New Zealand.
Might just finish up with one last question, and that's around how big is the threat or opportunity with regard to precision fermentation to our traditional New Zealand dairy and meat industries?
I think the second part of that question is the most interesting, the threat to our traditional dairy and meat. What is a traditional dairy and meat kind of industry? And the mere fact that a lot of our success has come from adapting and morphing and changing to what customers and consumers need. It reflects about what the future might look like, and a future that might look like with precision fermentation. So it's something that Fonterra certainly is looking at and has invested in as well, in terms of how this would complement or potentially also work. You're aware of the technology that could be displacing some of your current business as well. But precision fermentation is early on its journey. It's very early, and it has many challenges and barriers in terms of where it could go, what it could do. There's opportunities in terms of how precision fermentation works, and one of the inputs that actual dairy waste could be used in terms of what would be used for precision fermentation, which is really exciting and complementary to what we do. So it's not something we're worried about. It's not something we find threatening. It's the potential opportunity to complement industry moving forward and over decades into the future, because traditional. What does that mean in an industry that has to move rapidly?
And just to add, sorry, I'll let you go next, Kate. I think it's definitely an and conversation. We've got a lot of people to feed on this earth, and the population isn't decreasing at the moment that I'm aware of. And look, there's always going to be a place for premium agricultural exports on the global stage. And as you've alluded, we're actually a bit of a niche supplier in some ways. There's going to be enough demand for our products, so it's making sure we're targeting the right end of the market with our sustainable exports.
Pretty similar points. We know the demand for protein is going to double by 2050. We know we can't feed the world with that protein from the land and off the sea, how we always have. It's an and story. There will be a role for precision fermentation and lab-based meat. It has to be part of the story. We see, as a business, two kind of growth models out into the future. One which we call the sustenance model, which will be met by that kind of technology. That kind of growth model will be won by nation-building states, probably like the US and China, who've got capital, invest in the stainless steel and that technology and really scale it. That will be all about high volume, low cost, low premium commodity type meat, which that's not the beat up we want to play in. As I said earlier, we're less than 2% of global meat supply. We can't be in that growth model. What we've pointed ourselves directly towards is what we're calling the nourishment growth model. It's about nature-based farming. It builds on our uber attribute of grass-fed. It's harnessing that connection of the consumer, of nourishing the mind, the body and the soul, and making that connection back to nature and playing in those high-end premium value markets that are going to pay for that meat, that delivers that promise. We want meat from New Zealand to be like champagne from France, rare and desired. We've done deep consumer segmentation work to know with the consumers who want to buy that meat, where they live, where they shop, how to talk to them, how to get to them, and so that's what we're strongly focused on. It's a world of opportunity.
Amazing, and I think a nice note to leave it on. I think on behalf of all the audience, and certainly from me sitting in the US and promoting all of these great attributes, just firstly the insight that you provided in this session, a big thank you, but also the passion and the championing that the three of you are doing in your various industries is really outstanding. So just fantastic, and please keep it up. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panel.